All right, we'll go ahead. We'll call the June 11th Circ ILL meeting to order at 9:32 this morning. I'm going to go ahead and just do roll call vote, though it looks like we're all here. Cheryl,
Here.
Carrie,
Here.
Janine,
Here.
Kim,
Here.
Jennifer,
Here.
Samantha,
Here.
and Matthew.
Here.
All right, doesn't look like we have any guests, but I'm here, Deborah from CCS. All right, next up on our agenda is approval of the previous minutes. Did anyone, I sent those out ahead of time, so I'm not sure if you had a chance to review them. Did anyone have any changes to those minutes? No changes, no adjustments? All right, then we can consider the minutes from the previous meeting approved by unanimous consent. So that was an easy one. All right, now we're going to jump in to the meatier subjects. We've got quite a few items on the agenda today, but the first one I wanted to start out with was the updated patrons with blocks policy. So you saw in the packet that I sent ahead of time, governing board did officially approve that revised patrons with blocks policy that was recommended by the CERC technical group at their April meeting. Or no, I think it was actually much earlier. It was maybe your January meeting. So they did officially approve that change to our policy at their May 13th governing board meeting. So if you remember at that CERC meeting where that change was approved, there was a lot of discussion around the policy and some concerns from attendees that, that staff might be taking advantage of the new policy and or, overriding blocks in situations where it might not be warranted. So we thought that it would be really helpful to document some best practices for the policy that library staff could use as sort of like a guide of whether or not, it's appropriate in this situation to override a block or, a patron that is exceeding their maximum fee threshold. So in the doc I sent ahead of time, I had just some discussion questions to try to get our brains thinking about what we might want to include in best practices. So I'll just go through these and then we can just jump in wherever you might have thoughts. So some of the discussion questions I put in the packet are there specific scenarios in which you do not want another library to override a block that your library placed? Are there scenarios in which it's not appropriate to waive a fee on a patron's account? In what situations should staff contact the patron's home library or the blocking library to confirm whether it's okay to check out materials? Or are there any other general best practices that you might recommend? So I'll turn it over to the group to see if you have any thoughts on any of those or any suggestions for what we might want to include as a best practice for following the updated policy. So feel free to jump in wherever you might have thoughts.
Deborah, right off the bat, I think one of the big things in terms of specific scenarios that we wouldn't want to see overrides would be the NCOA, which
Hmm.
us participate in. I mean, I wouldn't want to see overrides for that. In terms of one of the other questions about waiving, fees and stuff, if there if there's some kind of a documented history in the notes that exceptions were made for a particular patron, that we wouldn't want to see fees waived at another library. I mean, that kind of stood out to me. Um, but yeah, patron history, and then obviously the history with the NCOA. Those are two big things that I think other libraries would want to look for.
I agree. I think those are two of the things I was thinking of too when I was looking at these questions. Like if there's an address confirmation issue, I think we shouldn't be overriding, which would be NCOA. Um, also, I wouldn't want or feel comfortable waiving fees that another library added. So I certainly wouldn't want them waiving fees on our end. Like we are very lenient and forgiving here at Mount Prospect, but I also recognize that not every library is, and it is not my job to override a choice that they made to charge a patron. So I wouldn't want to, and I wouldn't want other people to if we did. And then I think the other thing, and I think we've talked about this here, is library of things. Like if there were a library of things block or fee or whatever, I don't want anyone touching it or overriding. I think that is maybe the only scenario that I can think of in which I would say don't check out materials to them at all. Because in general, I feel with like checking out, like you're putting your own material at risk. Whatever the block is, you are choosing to put your library's material at risk by continuing to check them out. But with Library of Things, we have so many, not so many, we have ongoing issues with certain patrons that like if they have a hard block because of a Library of Things overdue or fee, I would not want them to be able to check out anywhere.
I agree with those. I also think if something's missing parts and we've identified it, I want to make sure that that's resolved ahead of time because I feel like that should also be something that should be taken into consideration because we typically use a hard blocking note when something is missing pieces or some libraries will do a missing parts checkout. I think looking at that to make sure that they're resolving it would be a good one. I mean, are there exceptions? I feel like yes, but for the most part, I do feel like missing pieces and missing parts, especially with Library of Things or movies or discs and things are important to get back together.
I agree. I think you covered everything had written down as well.
Is it worth explicitly saying that if you are making an exception and leaving the blocks, that you then put a non-blocking note stating that one exception was made so that then subsequent exceptions do not continue to snowball? Because I think for like our patrons, we have done like made an exception, they're going to identify the item at home, but then put that in the non-blocking note field so that they don't hop from staff to staff being like, well, that person helped me, I'm just going to go over here. Is that too much information to hope that other libraries would follow? Or is that just like a best practices thing for local procedures?
Yeah, I think that's like Matt was saying about having documentation in the notes for things. So I think that probably should be part of it. So everyone else knows what happened.
And I think the wave, one thing that I noticed too is if a patron has a lost item that they checked out, let's say at Glenview, and they checked it out at Glenview and they return it at another library, if your staff doesn't check it in and waive it, like an auto waive, and they just send it and leave as is, it stays as a bill on that library's account or library patron's account. So then you would have to manually waive it. Like, I don't know if you've seen that. It happens. So I think if you end up having to waive something, putting it in a note, like in the waive, why you're waiving something. So that way, when you look at the transaction history, you can see why someone waived something. Is that clear? I don't know if I muddied it.
Yeah,
The tricky part.
that makes
Oh, sorry,
sense.
Deborah.
No, go ahead, Gary.
The tricky part with that is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like you can't waive it, and I know this is a shortcoming, you can't waive it at the time of check-in, like you actually have to go into the account and waive it, correct? Like if you wanted to add a note associated with that waive, like that's one of the, for me, the shortcomings of like adding notes at the time of the charge or the waive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just show, I think, Kim, where you're suggesting to add the note. So I'm in just my test patron count. I have just a $1 fee. So if I select that fee and click waive charge, I can add a note here.
Yeah.
So that's what you're suggesting is like at the time you waive something, put in a note here so that there's context later for like why
Yeah.
it was waived.
Yeah, because that happened with almost like $250 worth of material for a patron. It's just where they checked it out and how it went billed. So rather than leaving it billed on the patron's account, we called and they said, yes, just check it in and waive the charge. So
Okay, I'll just put a fake note here. So we'll click waive.
Mhm.
We'll waive the fee. And then if I go over to my transaction summary, I'll be able to see the note here on the right hand side. So we've got documentation. I think that's a great like best practice that if you're waiving something, you should put that note in.
I think maybe something else to consider is the type of restricted maybe library card they have, especially if it's a non-resident. What are they asking to override and how quickly that card might be expiring?
Like consider patron code, card expiration date. So, Jennifer, are you suggesting like less flexibility if it's like a non-CCS patron and or if their card is coming up
Yes,
for
like especially
expiration?
those like for us, we have Inverness members who purchase and then they're considered a full service card, but it's for a year. So if there's already an unresolved issue and then they say go to Mount Prospect and you're overriding maybe an issue we have and then their card's expiring in 3 weeks anyways, there might less likely, maybe they're not going to renew the card and pay for it and it's going to be more loss of material. Just something to consider.
Any other best practices? Again, thinking back to that January CERC meeting where this was approved, I think a lot of the concerns were around like library staff would kind of be doing this all the time. I don't think when we talked in this group that that was kind of what we wanted with this policy. It was really just to say like in these exceptions where we really want to provide good customer service, we want all of you to have the flexibility to do so without needing to like jump through hoops. That kind of provide that optimal patron experience. So maybe putting in just some kind of note to the best practices, kind of in line with that, is that like this, the goal is to provide good customer service versus make blocks obsolete essentially because we don't care about them, right? So maybe we can kind of have some sort of intro to that. Okay, so far we've sort of got in our best practices, like we would probably not want to see overrides if there is an issue with the patron's address. We're trying like either an NCOA block or some other address verification problem. We want those to be resolved prior to checking anything out to the patron. Um, if there's some sort of like history of overrides, then we would want to exercise more caution in doing that again. So always checking notes to see if that's the case. We'd want to, in most scenarios, avoid waiving fees that another library added. I'm sure there is some kind of exception here, but for the most part, ideally, waiving could be restricted to things your own library build. Avoiding waives or overrides when it comes to library of things fees or blocks. Wanting to resolve missing parts or pieces prior to circulating additional materials out to the card. If you are making an exception, adding a non-blocking note to indicate an override was made is helpful just for documentation purposes. And then considering patron code and card expiration dates, trying to resolve any outstanding issues before that card might come to the end of its term. Anything else we might have forgotten here? No? So what I'll do is draft up a write-up that kind of encompasses all of these things, and I'll send it out to this group before we put it up on the website, just so you can have like a once-over and look. And then since it's just going to be a page on our website with some best practices, we can keep tweaking it as we need to, adding other examples or tips as we go along and think of things. So I'll get this together, probably not this week, but hopefully end of next week. I'd like to have this page on the website ready before we send out the update to the policy to the CERC group, just because if there's questions, this might help reassure some concerns about the new policy. So I'll pull this together, send it all of your way just to take a peek over, and then we'll get it up on the website. So if you think of anything else that should be added in the meantime, just let me know. Uh-oh. Okay, Carrie, I see your internet's struggling. No worries if you have to dip out. go for it. Okay, the next item on the agenda is LX Starter. So I know not everybody here is an LX Starter beta library. I think Matthew and Carrie, we've got Wilmette and Fox River Valley representing our beta libraries here. Anyone else here an LX Starter beta library? No. Okay. Soon you will all be able to move to LX Starter as well. So we are working on recommended workflows for how to manage patron bounces in LX Starter. So I want to give you kind of a high level overview of the kind of data that we'll be able to see in LX Starter once your library moves over to those notices. So give me a minute. I'm just going to grab my PowerPoint here.
I just wanted to mention while you're doing that, Deborah,
Yeah.
I tried to use the links that you included and I couldn't access them.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I shared a document that you were not able to access. So I did spin up a new version that should hopefully be in a location you can get to. So I popped that link into the chat just now. So
Thank you.
sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again.
So is this basically replacing MessageBee?
Not MessageBee. So what LX Starter is, actually, let me go back. Let me go back to the beginning of my doc here. Doop, doop, doop. Sorry to, okay. What LX Starter is an interface for creating and sending Polaris email notices. So we continue to have MessageBee to manage phone notices and text notices, but now we have LX Starter to replace those kind of plain text Polaris email notices. So instead of sending those through Polaris, they are generated in Polaris according to our notice criteria. So for example, overdues at 3 days, second overdue at 15 days, and so on. That information is then sent to the LX Starter interface, and then LX Starter delivers the notice to the patron. The great thing about LX Starter is that you can make your notices beautiful. You can add images. You can have a design that matches your library's branding versus, again, those Polaris plain text notices. We don't really have many customization options for those. So we rolled out LX Starter to 5 beta libraries, and they were our guinea pigs essentially, and helped us figure out how the software works, helped us troubleshoot the design, the setup, the delivery. And so now that that has been successful, we will be starting to offer LX Starter notices to everyone else in CCS. So again, they don't replace MessageBee. That will continue to be used for phone and text notices. But what they do replace is those plain text Polaris notices that we send out. So in LX Starter, there are 12 notice types that can be sent. Those are the ones you see here on our screen. It's almost every notice type with a couple exceptions, including like the patron expiration notice. So you've got almost due, your overdue notices, your bill notice, manual bill, your holds notices, fine notices, missing part notices, canceled hold notice, and the borrow by mail failure notices are the notice types that are eligible to be sent through LX Starter once your library goes live. So I'm going to hop ahead here. So I know that all of you are currently managing bounces for Polaris email notices, but in LX Starter, we have access to more information about those bounces or delivery issues. So that's why we're bringing this topic to the group today to see what your thoughts are on the best way or best practices for managing those delivery issues. So in LX Starter, one of the kinds of delivery issues is a soft bounce. A soft bounce in LX Starter is considered a temporary delivery issue, and examples of soft bounces include the recipient has a full mailbox, so their mailbox is full, they can't receive any further emails. Maybe the recipient's email server is temporarily down or offline. So in this instance, LX Starter or Amazon Web Services attempts to deliver that notice for 12 hours. If after 12 hours, the notice still is indicating it hasn't gone through, it's soft bouncing, it will be marked as a soft bounce in LX Starter. In some cases, that notice still gets to the patron. It doesn't necessarily mean it won't get to the patron. Maybe they delete some emails, maybe their email server comes back line and they still get that email. But in some cases, this email may not make it to the patron because whatever blocked it initially isn't resolved. LX Starter, if a patron's message soft bounces, will continue to use that patron's email moving forward. Again, because this is hopefully a temporary issue that can be fixed. So nothing really happens on the LX Starter side. It will continue to attempt to use this patron's email moving forward to deliver notices. The next type of delivery issue is a hard bounce, and a hard bounce is considered a permanent delivery failure. So an example of a hard bounce could include an invalid email address, so an email address doesn't exist, or an email domain doesn't exist. In the case of a hard bounce, LX Starter does take some actions. The patron's notice preference is updated to phone. A note is added to the patron's account. LX Starter will not use the patron's email address again. So even if the email address remains in the patron's account, LX Starter will not try to send another notice to it. So in order to resume email notices, a new email address has to be added to the patron's account. Another type of delivery failure in LX Starter is a notice being marked as spam. This can happen accidentally if a patron, swipes the wrong way or clicks the wrong button, or on purpose if they really truly think this is spam and mark it as so in their inbox. In the case of an email being marked as spam, LX Starter will automatically update the patron's notification preference to phone. Their email address is added to what's called an SES suppression list. Essentially, this is a list of do not use this email because if you continue to send email to an email address that has marked you as spam, it can damage your email reputation, which could prevent emails from being sent out to other users as well. So this email address is added to a list that says, do not send any more emails ever to this email address. Just like with a hard bounce, a new email address is going to be needed in the patron's account to restore email notices to them. And there is a workaround for this that I'll mention in just a second. The last kind of error that you can see in LX Starter is a failed to send. This means that the notice ran into some errors when being processed. Typically and hopefully what we've seen with failed to send is that if the patron is still eligible for that notice, the next time notice is run, that notice will attempt to be redelivered to the patron. So we're not going to talk about failed to send today because the hope is that that email will get to the patron the next time the notice job runs. So I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions. Again, we've got soft bounces, we have a hard bounce, and then we have marked as spam as sort of the three kinds or three groups of delivery failures or issues in LX Starter.
So I have a question. What happens if someone accidentally marked it as spam, but now they're trying to get their notices?
So unfortunately, LX Starter can't know whether it was marked as spam on purpose or accidentally. So even for an accidental marked as spam, it's treated as intentional. So unfortunately, their email will be added to that block list, and we won't be able to use that email address again.
Okay.
There is a workaround for both hard bounce and marked as spam, and I'm going to skip ahead a couple slides. So if the patron says this is my email address, it is correct. There is sort of a hack or a workaround to add a +1 to the patron's email address. So for example, patron email +1 @gmail.com. And this could allow AlexStarter to resume sending notices to that patron. The caveat I have here is that that workaround isn't accepted by all email providers, so it might not be a successful workaround for all patrons. In talking to support for AlexStarter, they said that like AOL, I don't know how many people have AOL, but like AOL doesn't accept the +1. Gmail is the big provider that does. So again, this could be a potential workaround for a patron who might have accidentally marked something as spam, but it may not work in all scenarios. There is some development going on for AlexStarter that would allow you to manually remove an email address from sort of that suppression list, but that's not complete at this time.
For the spam, if a patron does it accidentally, can they undo it on their? No. So there's just this is the only option for them to not have to put a totally different email address.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So if so this also works for the hard, not just the spam, but the hard bounce, like you said. So they'd have to have the additional email address. Okay.
Yeah.
That,
So if this doesn't, and I think in most scenarios, a hard block is like right, the email likely doesn't exist for a hard block. I don't know how often we would run into a hard block situation that is a valid email address, because it is like completely failing. So in most cases, it probably doesn't exist anymore. Like the domain or email provider no longer exists. Maybe there's a typo, etc. But I feel like it's probably more likely marked as spam happens unintentionally on the patron's end. So I don't know if Matthew or Carrie, if you found that you've run into a lot of hard bounces where the patron says that email address is correct.
Well, I mean, we've been training our staff to address it as it comes up with patrons, so they know what to do in the event that the hard bounce comes. But I haven't had actually any examples, firsthand examples since we initiated it. So I'm hoping staff know what to do, should it.
Yeah.
But we've been following the best practices that CCS had laid out in terms of guidelines and what to do.
Pause and see if there's more questions. Keep asking your questions because I know this is a little bit confusing. We don't have access to the same level of data through the Polaris email notices, so distinguishing between things marked as spam and hard blocks and soft bounces is sort of a new thing that we're trying to figure out how to manage and give some best practices for. So I'm going to go through sort of like the draft best practices that we put together, and we're really looking for your feedback on whether these make sense or if you have any suggestions or any changes. So our recommendation for patrons who mark a message as spam is to remove that email address from the patron's account. In addition to removing the email address from the patron's account, we are recommending adding a non-blocking note to that patron's account in Leap. And I have an example of what that could look like here. So for example, adding date and your initials, and then noting that AlexStarter notice to this email address was marked as spam, notice preference updated to phone, reset to email, and add different email address to resume email notices. One of the questions I have for this group is like, in this scenario, should we remove the email address from the patron's account? Again, Polaris will not send another notice to this email. I do think it's important to document what the email address is. That way, one, staff don't add the same email address back to the account. And two, we just sort of have some documentation on what happened. But I'll open it up to any feedback here on whether, again, you think that step of removing the email address from the account is warranted, or if we should leave it in their account knowing no further emails will be sent to them through that email.
Well, Deborah, I know some libraries were removing the email. But if the email is correct, the issue might be on the patron's end. I mean, if we take out the email altogether, the patron could just give us the same email again, and then we're back at, where we started. I mean, some libraries could maybe put the old email in notes field, but that seems like a lot of work. I think it would be easier to leave the email and then, have the patron confirm whether or not, we this way, I mean, we can determine whether or not the issue is with the patron. I'm just concerned if the email is completely removed, they might provide us, give us the same email that we had before, at least in regards to like some of the hard bounces.
Yeah.
I
Um,
agree with Matthew for those reasons, and also something that we ran into when we were deleting the email addresses, and this may be more relevant to us because we are newer to CCS, but we had a lot of patrons with no birth dates. And we are now, especially with BiblioCore, trying to avoid placeholder birth dates, and you can't, if you remove the email address, you cannot save the account if you don't have a birth date. So we
Oh.
stopped doing that so that we weren't entering placeholder birth dates without absolutely having to. So I agree for a couple of reasons that leaving the email address in and including it also in the note would be more helpful, I think.
I would also like to keep the email because sometimes we contact patrons directly. And if that email's gone, how would we contact them?
Mm-hmm.
Can I just ask another question? So we do email addresses to the second email if there's two on the account, correct? So if a patron has two email addresses and one bounces, will the other person be considered, will that account? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
is
I
it
know what you're saying. Unfortunately, Alex Starter only sends notices to the primary email address. So in that case, the secondary email address wouldn't have been added to any kind of block list. So you could move that secondary email into the primary email to allow them to resume receiving notices through LX Starter.
will this cause confusion for like e-receipts? Like I get my e-receipts through the good email address, but now I'm not getting it through, I'm not getting everything else. So I just,
Yeah, that could cause an issue. So I do not think, and actually let me ask on this, I don't think if a patron marks an email as spam through LX Starter, it would not impact delivery of e-receipts through Polaris because email receipts are still sent through Polaris versus LX Starter. So I
one more.
suppose that
Okay.
that would be a reason to keep it in there, is that they could then continue to at least receive their e-receipts to their primary email address. And I will also
One,
add, I believe that development is happening. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself now. I can't remember if I said it out loud or just thought it in my head. That they are working on some development to allow delivery of LX Starter notices to both email addresses to match Polaris, but that hasn't happened yet.
and one more question. Patrons have the ability to update their email address on the app. What happens if they keep updating it on the app?
The email would still be in the suppression list. So if they update it, they still wouldn't be able to get emails to that email address.
So you had mentioned that if we keep using that same email address, then that becomes an issue for us as senders. So if they keep updating that email address, even though they're not responding to us, will that can I'm
I asked
just
that
trying
same
to
question because I was like, do we have to take it out? Because if you keep trying to send a notice, isn't going to damage your email reputation. So that's the reason why it's added to this, what's called that SES suppression list, is
okay.
that even if you see the notice, and this is hard to give context without you having maybe seen the back end of LX Starter, it will appear as if that notice it will appear as though email notices are continually being delivered to that address, but they are not. So even in LX Starter, if it's like, oh, we attempted to send this notice marked as spam. Um, on the back end, that notice is never getting to that patron once it's been marked as spam once. It's LXR's like stopping it before it even gets out.
Now,
So it
sorry,
won't dam it won't continue to damage your email reputation because once it's on that list, it's never getting off of it. And no notice will go out after that first marked as spam
so the notice
attempt.
then won't show in Leap that an email notice went out. You know how when you can check the notices in Leap to see when, and we use that as like, hey, check your email on this day with this
Yeah.
time. Will that be no longer happen too since it's spammed?
Yeah, I'm going to stop my share really quick.
No problem. Sorry, this is
No, this is a good question because I don't remember. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to double check. And Kira and Matthew, if you remember, feel free to chime in, but I'm going to open LX Starter and double check.
Kim, can you repeat the question, please?
so you know in the notice feature in Leap where you can see when the patron was notified for their hold via email or that setup. We use that as verification for patrons, like, hey, check your email at this date and time was when that was sent. So if this has now been marked as spam or has a hard block, will that reflect in Leap that an email did not go out? Because then we're giving misinformation. I think that's right.
Yeah, and I'm going to check really quick what it looks like in Leap when a user has marked it as spam.
So the
Okay. So I don't want to share my screen because there is some patron info I don't want to uh, share in a recording. So let me just put a screenshot of what I see. So it does look like for marked as spam, Leap will not indicate that the notice bounced. So you would need to check LX Starter to confirm that.
it sounds like Deborah is saying what I was saying before I disappeared into the ether. So good.
Okay, so it will show that an email was sent. So
Mm-hmm.
then staff have to take an additional step to make sure. And so do other libraries have all their staff have access to LX Starter? I'm just, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it seems like based on who has access and the number of accounts per library, it's limited.
Okay.
But maybe
So,
as more libraries are onboarded, maybe you would make a different decision to give greater access.
okay. So don't necessarily trust that. Okay. You'll have to look into deeper to see if there's a note on the account by someone that indicates that the email bounced. Okay.
And I think that was kind of behind the recommendation to remove the email address. That like if the email address wasn't there, it would be a flag for staff that like, oh, there's no email address. Maybe I should check the notes. Though it sounds like from previous meetings we've had, your staff are pretty well trained to check notes if there is one.
Could the email address be removed and placed in our new notes that no one ever looks at? Our new dated note field? So maybe it would be, we could still find it for people that cannot check LX Starter.
That is definitely an option, though I think we said that data notes would be used more for like operational updates versus something like this that staff might need to reference. In the draft procedures we sent out, we are suggesting that in the blocking or in the non-blocking note, you put the email address in there with that note indicating it was marked as spam. Um,
Okay, but I have a question. If it's removing the email, how do I add the email into their notes if the email's been removed?
You would need to copy it at the time you put in the note. So you would put in a note, copy the email address that was marked as spam, and then delete the email address from the patron's account. But it sounds like
Oh, so they're not automatically deleting it.
they are not, no. Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
So we're trying to figure out best practices or recommendations for how to manage. All that's happening on the LX Starter end is that the patron, when the patron marks it as spam, it's flipping them to phone notices. It's leaving the email address in their account. And then our recommendation is add a non-blocking note to indicate the user marked the message as spam, with an action item, requesting an update to the email address to resume email notices. And then the question is whether we should take the email address out or leave it in. So I'm hearing, at least from a couple staff, that leaving it in might be our best option. So I see a message in the chat. Okay, Carrie says that's her logic, and is in the camp to remove. If she sees that the email returns and it's the same bad one, she kind of knows the note wasn't read. Something weird is happening with the patron's email. And then she copied in. It's okay, Carrie. You have to use your mic. Keep putting things in the chat. There is an auto message from LX Starter that is applied when a message hard bounces. So Carrie popped that default text into the chat. But I do not think a message is not added automatically if the patron marks it as spam. So that is a manual step we'll have to take. Okay, so I feel like we're kind of on the fence about adding, or leaving the email address and removing the email address. Any other thoughts on this one?
I'm
I
fine.
know. Oh, go ahead, Cheryl.
I'm fine with removing it. I was worried that they were removing it. So as long as
Yeah.
I'm removing it, that's fine. I just want to be able to see that email so that I can still store it for something.
And I guess, like Matthew and Carrie, how many patrons have you actually had have these come through? I guess since you've been testing it, do we know how many patrons?
Well, like at the end of the week, I'll go into Alex Starter. I'll do a filter. I'll filter out like the soft bounces, hard bounces, and spam. And I've just been making sure that CCS has been putting in the automatic messages. I mean, throughout the course of the week, I mean, there's maybe a handful that are getting hard bounced. I haven't really seen too many spam. I haven't checked it this week yet, but it's like something that I'll do like each week, and I'll just make sure that the notes are being added. Going forward, especially if we do get the spam, we're going to have to, since there isn't a automatically generated CCS note on that, we'll have to go in manually and put in those notes for any spam that we get. But at least for us, I mean, or for myself, I mean, the rest of the staff don't have access to LXR. It's just myself and Mark. That might change at some point, but it's kind of like a weekly thing. I'll go in and see maybe during the course of the week there were like 5 hard bounces or something. So it's something that just going to be like a daily routine, for us, or weekly routine.
Yeah, I went.
It's certainly something we can't overlook, because I mean, especially with these spam emails that are potential coming in, we're going to have to look at that more closely.
I looked at Wilmette's activity. So Wilmette has not had any messages marked as spam yet.
Okay.
CCS sends the pre-overdue notice reminder to non-CCS patrons. We've received, I think, two or three patrons marking notices as spam. It's a little bit messy kind of in the logs, because unless you remove the email address, it looks like notices keep getting sent to those patrons over and over, though we know that they're not actually getting out. So I think it's 3 total unique patrons have marked a CCS notice as spam. Looks like Carrie said they haven't seen anything marked as spam at their end. So hopefully this is like few and far between.
Okay. I just wondered what that conversation looks like with a patron too. Like unfortunately we can no longer use this email address. And so they're like, well, this is my primary. I only have this one. So do we
Right.
need to look at that report that CCS creates about invalid email addresses more often?
So this wouldn't be caught in that
Okay.
report. So what you would need to do is kind of what Matthew explained is you'd be using LX Starter to monitor
Those. Okay.
bounces. And that would kind of replace other reports that you're looking at.
Thank you.
We need to update our guidelines to, I know that right now we're saying that you need to check the Polaris email delivery report, but I think rather than that, we'll be directing libraries to check instead once you've moved over the LX Starter details. That just gives you more information than we can find through Polaris. Okay. So I think at this time, I'll talk with our team. We may recommend, again, removing that email address from the patron's account, knowing, like Janine from Mont Prospect, these are guidelines, not necessarily requirements. Because of your situation with the blank birth dates, if it doesn't make sense right now to remove it, I think that we like these are guidelines and best practices. If you're not able to do that, I think that is okay. Okay. So then the next thing I wanted, I'm just going to go back to the packet. Um, the next thing I wanted to talk about was the hard bounces. So oops, in LX Starter, what happens when a hard email notice hard bounces is that LX Starter will automatically add a non-blocking note. And hopefully you can see on my screen, and Carrie also popped it into the chat, the format of that note. So it is email address, insert patron's actual email address, hard bounced on date, and then time. So unfortunately, this non-blocking note can't be customized and it will be appended to the end of any existing notes. So our practices for adding notes is like add the most recent one at the top. Unfortunately, LX Starter doesn't do that. It puts it at the bottom and it adds it like in line with any existing note. So there's not even like a line break or anything else. So we're suggesting, or like our draft recommendation is for hard bounces, one, review the patron's email address and leap. There might be a typo, right? Maybe Gmail is spelled wrong. Maybe there's an obvious missing letter. If you can find a mistake that's kind of clear, you can just correct the email address and hopefully that will fix the problem. But if there is no obvious typo, we're recommending again that removal of the email address and then updating the existing non-blocking note. Because LX Starter puts this like non-blocking note at the bottom and it doesn't quite include all of the information we might want to see, we're recommending updating it and moving it to the top of the non-blocking notes. So again, here's an example of what we could suggest libraries put in. Again, email address, hard bounced, notice preference updated to phone, and then some directions to help staff know what to do next or how to fix it, which is add alternate email address and reset preference to email to resume those notices. So any thoughts on this? I'm just going to stop my share quickly. So my question here for the group is one, do we feel the same about removing the email address? Again, this is a hard block. So I think in most cases, the email address likely isn't valid. Question for the group is, should we modify that existing non-blocking note that's automatically added by LX Starter to kind of match the example I popped into that doc?
I vote yes on that.
Okay.
That's why I copied
I-
mine into the chat after we had met Deborah.
Oh,
I
I see
kind of
that. Yeah.
I kind of cribbed what you had shared. I was like, I like that format. And in case it cut out or I didn't say that, removing the email is, I'm in favor of that because it most likely is a typo or something. Sometimes it's noticeable, other times it's not. If it's removed, it gives the patron a little more agency to change the email address on their own, because not only are they getting phone notices, but they also no longer have an email address associated with their account. I put more faith in their hands to correctly add an email address than the staff who saw a 0 and thought it was an O or a 1 and an L kind of thing. Versus if they're just like, oh, I want email address notifications, and don't do anything to actually troubleshoot that email.
All right. So I'm hearing we're comfortable with removing that email address similar to marked as spam, and then generally feel that modifying that note and putting it up at the top would be recommended. Just so one, it's more clear what happened and what should happen next, and two, it's not lost at the bottom of a patron's non-blocking notes.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of the formatting of
Okay.
the note. I mean, so much part of LX training for us is training the staff and stressing the importance of looking at the non-blocking notes, which they should be doing anyway, but especially now with the possible bounce backs, making it more visible for staff would be great.
Okay.
Um, I did have a little concern about it being a non-blocking note, just because the way that we handle it right now is when they bounce back, we put it as a blocking note so that we can grab the patron to be like, hey, your email didn't work. We want to update your email so that you get those email notices, so we can get that fixed for them. But if it's in the non-blocking note, I could see it going for a long time before the patron might realize they're not getting those emails. If they're never coming to the desk, staff might not see it. So that's just kind of my concern, is that if it's being hard blocked because somebody, like on the staff end, misspelled Gmail, now the patron isn't going to get email notices, and it could be a while before we notice that the patron notices that they're not getting those notices.
Any thoughts on that from anyone else? I think when we were putting together the guidelines, we were worried about hard blocking patrons or recommending because it could stop their access to things like ebooks, and so on. And so didn't want to recommend blocking them just for an incorrect email address. But I definitely something that like understand the concern is a hard block would help you catch it faster or like fix it faster.
And Deborah, that was our feeling here. I mean, in the interest of customer service, I mean, we didn't want to be like punishing the patron in case they were trying to do other things, online, if it's a staff error because of the email. That's why we've kind of been preaching, check those non-blocking notes.
Does anyone do any more proactive outreach to patrons whose emails might bounce? Like contacting them. Well, I guess it's hard to contact them by email if their email is bouncing. But like contacting them by phone or anything like that. No? Okay. I didn't think so, but thought it's worth asking. Does anyone else feel like a hard block is more appropriate than a non-blocking note? Or have thoughts on that? And Carrie, you're unmuted, but I can't hear you, so I'm not sure if your mic is giving you hassling you. So Samantha, I do feel like that could be um so here's where I would hesitate is with a blocking note. I would hesitate if a patron who's not your own, like placing a blocking note on someone else's patron for an incorrect email. Do
Sure,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah,
maybe like optionally you could put one on your own patron's account, but I would be worried about doing that to patrons who don't belong to your library. Like let's say like a Niles patron visited Park Ridge and a
sure.
notice bounced. Um, I would be worried in that scenario. Um,
Yeah. No, and I understand the notion of not wanting to impact patrons being able to use their account and such. Um, I don't have a strong understanding of the LX starter, but are we going to be able to independently go in and like gather that information so that like on our end we'd be able to independently put like a block to ask the patron for their correct email, like once a week go through and see who got hard blocked and just do it manually on our own?
yeah, I think you could. So in LX Starter, and again, this is recorded, so what I'm just worried about is
Sure, sure.
I think maybe I'm just going to pause the recording really quick so I can just show you what it looks like because I
Okay.
know this is kind of difficult uh, to figure out. So I'm okay, resuming recording. We're done looking at patron data. Going back to the packet, we were talking about those hard bounces. So it seems like the recommendations we have, the group feels pretty good about removing that email address after reviewing for typos and then updating that existing non-blocking note, moving it up to the top. So I think we'll kind of keep those as is. The other one that we have some questions on is what to do in the case of a soft bounce, because soft bounces don't necessarily mean a permanent delivery failure. A notice that soft bounce could still end up in the patron's inbox if whatever issue that caused it to soft bounce is resolved. So again, a soft bounce could be caused by something like a full mailbox. It could be caused by like a temporary blip in the patron's email server or like some sort of temporary blocking of the email. But again, that could eventually go through to the end user. So we're thinking we have kind of two options here is one, do nothing. If it soft blocks, hopefully the patron will resolve that temporary issue. Notices will eventually go through. Or if we're worried that that notice didn't go through, we also have the option to change the patron's notice preference to phone manually, because this won't happen automatically, and add some kind of non-blocking note. So I'm curious from the group if you have thoughts on how to manage soft bounces and/or Matthew and Carrie, if you have any insights that you want to share with the group since you've been live on LX for a while now.
Well, the soft bounce is probably one of my biggest questions because I wasn't sure at what point does the soft bounce become a hard bounce? How many attempts are made to the patron's account? I wasn't sure, what we can do because if the inbox is full, I mean, that's on the patron's end. So yeah, I'm kind of looking for, some recommendations or guidance on this. Perhaps it would be best to have the soft bounce just default to phone and it would be incumbent upon the patron to then let us know they're not getting their emails or with the non-blocking note we can then tell the patron, hey, look, your inbox is full, this is why your messages aren't going through. But the soft bounce is the one that I probably have the most questions about and the best way to handle that because I wasn't sure, what we can do because again, the issue is really on the patrons end with inbox that's maxed out or whatever reason.
You're muted, Deborah.
Thank you, Janine. I was just reading Carrie's reply out loud, saying that she doesn't do anything currently for soft bounces. So she does add a note as a reference for staff in case the patron asks and reports or asks, why am I not getting my email notices? Um, so the note will tell staff how often it's happening before they might make a change to notification options. Anyone have any thoughts on how to manage? So, Carrie, it sounds like your recommendation or your workflow is leave the email, don't change their notice preference, but add a note indicating there was some kind of soft bounce.
Yeah, and I guess that is a question that Matthew has. Like, do you know, is there a limit before it becomes a hard bounce, or is that not a thing?
I, as far as I know, from what we've been told by support, it doesn't roll over into a hard bounce. So as long as the patron's email provider indicates like it's just soft bouncing, no action is going to be taken on LX Starter. If something changes and the email provider returns some sort of hard bounce, then the hard bounce protocol would be called. But as long as it says soft bounce in LX Starter is assuming that email will go through.
Yeah, we have some serial folks who just full, not full, full, not full, and they're just kind of skating that line. So I haven't had an instance where it's like, we're just going to remove the email altogether.
Anyone have any other thoughts on this one? So maybe we would update our guidelines to say to just recommend adding, as Carrie suggested, adding a non-blocking note that would be a reference point for staff. And if a patron was to come to the desk to say, hey, why am I not getting my emails? Then they would at least have a note that would clue them in that there might be an issue with their email. And then we can kind of troubleshoot from there. So does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, perfect. Okay. I think that rounds out the questions we had for the group on managing um, patron bounces as spam. So that your feedback was so helpful. It feels overly complicated to kind of figure out the right path to follow with these notices. But I imagine as more libraries move over to LX Starter, we'll kind of keep finessing and kind of keep making our recommendations better once we're have a little bit more time under our belt. But I think hopefully this will do good for now.
I do have a question just in general about LX Starter, which you might have said earlier and I missed. Because I know it's still in beta, when are you looking to have more libraries switch over to LX Starter? What is the timeline for that?
Yeah, we're going to be we don't quite have our plan finalized yet, but we're analyzing the feedback that our beta libraries gave us on, how much time did they spend? Like what additional training might they need? What would have helped the process go smoother? So we're currently looking at all the feedback they gave us and coming up with our rollout plan. But essentially, we're going to be offering LX Starter to anyone in the next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
So we don't want it does, I will be honest, it takes a lot of time to set up the notices to really get the design right using their notice builder. So I think from what we learned from the beta libraries, like it could take up to 20 hours to get your notices built and like ready to send out. So it's kind of a significant time investment for staff. So we want to make sure that we're giving everyone the flexibility with like your really busy project schedules and renovations and all these things to kind of go live when you're ready, and not push anyone when you don't have the capacity to make the change. But look for information. And again, we should be offering LX Starter to everyone in the coming months. They look really good though, so I think Wilmette, Fox River, like their notices look so beautiful. I think it really is a great change for your patrons.
Well, thank you, Deborah. The one thing I underestimated was the
Yeah.
time that our communications department would spend designing and stuff. So I feel a little guilty about that, but no, they turned out really nice.
They did. They did. You guys did a great job. Okay, so we're we're running short on time here, but we've got two more items on our agenda. So the next one was a discussion of the ILL billing report. So the ILL group at their April meeting requested a new web report that looked at bills charged to ILL library accounts by your location. So essentially outstanding bills for ILL materials that you sent out to non-CCS location. So Bob put together a new report for web reports called the ILL Library Outstanding Bill Report and Web Reports. Um, and so questions for this group is any info that's missing from this report, any info we should take out, and then a question of whether this should be added to our existing circulation report guidelines, either as a like essentially like required or recommended report, or just as a suggested report. So I'm going to open an example that I shared, and this is Northbrook's. This looks, you guys are looking good here. So Northbrook has only 4 outstanding bills that are tied to ILL library accounts. So the report here includes the date that the bill was charged, the barcode of the library account, the name of the library account, the title of the materials, the item barcode, the cost of the bill, and then obviously the billing library, which would be your location. I think the intent of this report was just to help libraries do cleanup of outstanding ILL bills. Some of the bills on ILL library accounts are pretty old, so this report would help libraries know if they need to take action, whether it's, all right, we can waive a bill that's 8 years old, or I don't know what other action you could take, but if it's a more recent bill, reach out to the library to request payment, or again, take action to potentially like waive fees that you're not planning to recoup at this point.
Deborah, I talked with Andy. She really likes it.
Oh,
One
good.
thing we noticed though is 4/19/2018 is more than 7 years ago. Are they getting purged?
We are behind with this year's 7-year purge. So currently, this hasn't gone out in CCS News, but will either this week or next week. We're planning to do the purge July 4th.
Okay.
So this will be purged with that upcoming purge.
Yeah. We felt it was very specific and allowed us to have the information we needed. And then Andy recommended on a monthly basis would be the biggest one. Or I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak for Andy, but I feel like it should be a monthly basis.
Like we'd recommend libraries check it on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I feel like if you're trying to lend material to a library who owes consistently, it doesn't make them look like a vendor that you would want to work with, possibly if they've got a lot of money outstanding, and depending upon internal structures at other libraries, they may do it different for their billing purposes.
So I agree. I think everything on there is what we need. I don't think we need any more information. And if we are going to require it, I think monthly also.
So we have our circulation guidelines on our website. And I'm going to pull that open quickly for us to look at. So these guidelines in the top portion of this page this did go to the circulation technical group for approval. So at the top portion of the page, these are kind of like our, say like required or reports that library staff like should actively be monitoring. On a recommended cadence. So we've got things like, of course, the pick list and your print notices. So for each report here, we've got the report name, how often or the frequency, where to find it, action to take, and then our documentation. So for this report, does the group feel like it should belong in the top portion here, or should it be under our list of suggested reports? So they're not part of our required guidelines, but the suggested reports are ones that we think are really helpful to monitor. And if we recommend that it goes here up at the top in our list of sort of required reports, what action are we expecting library staff to take? And do we, depending on what you say, this may need to go to like another group. Like if we're saying resolve any fees after X amount of time, we might need to take that back to the ILL group for some input and feedback. So I'm curious kind of what this group thinks.
So this doesn't really affect other libraries because it's your ILL. So could it be more of a suggested report since it's not affecting other people in the consortium as much?
Hi, Kat.
I kind of had the same question because I could see it being useful if like we really care about this information, but for it to be required to look at, I guess it depends on, and I need to talk to my ILL team a little bit more about it. But if we're not going to actively follow up and it doesn't affect like our standing at other libraries, I feel like it's a great report to have and to see what's out there, but to require it when some libraries might not even do anything with it, which I guess, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking because I feel like I stopped making sense.
I think you made sense. Yeah, you're saying if you're saying kind of why should we make it required if we don't have sort of action that we're also requiring you to take.
Right.
My impression from the ILL meeting was that libraries who were interested in this were the ones who wanted to be more proactive in this, while others were just like, whatever. So I think it makes sense for it to just be a suggested report as well.
Anyone feel it should be required? Okay, seeing no takers here. All right, that was the simpler path because then we really can just kind of update it and add it into the list of suggested reports and then send the report out to the ILL group, letting them know that there's a new resource available for them to take a look at and keep tabs on outstanding bills. I know a lot of libraries are already really actively monitoring these bills and resolving them, but there's probably some that have just slipped through the cracks over time and through staffing changes. So, all right, we can get then that up on this page. We'll send it out to the ILL group since it sounds like the info here is what you need. If you do have any suggestions moving forward, just open a help desk ticket and Bob can work some magic. All right. Then the last item we had on here was our only action item, our only vote. So at our last circulation meeting, the group approved a change to our blocks and notes section of the CERC manual. And the change that was implemented was essentially allowing libraries to alter or remove blocks, blocking notes, and non-blocking notes if they can resolve the issue or can confirm that the issue was already resolved. This is just going to help kind of keep those notes and blocks fields tidy and up to date. So another library staff member noticed that there was something we missed when we updated that section of the CERC manual. In the changing another library's patron record, we had some references to kind of our old workflow. So in the changing another library's patron record section, we had wording that says you have to contact the patron's home library to ask them to make changes. So this is now obsolete based on the other approved changes by the CERC group. So really we just have to update this section of the manual. I put in some placeholder or example text here for what this could look like. So again, libraries can change the phone number, email, notification option, language, and password fields of any patrons and may associate patrons for hold permissions, adding in language that matches the text approved by the CERC technical group. So a library may apply best practices. to determine whether to add a note or block to any patron account, etc. And then kind of keeping that end text that any other changes must be performed by the patron's home library. Exceptions include non-CCS reciprocal borrower accounts and re-registering a patron who has moved from one CCS library to another. This feels kind of wordy, so as I was looking at it this morning, I was like, oh, maybe we could take out this yellow portion and just say libraries may apply or remove notes and blocks per guidelines in section 2V, patron blocks and notes, just so we don't have duplicate language or we don't have to change this part if we make changes again to the other section. But open to feedback or wording suggestions here.
My only concern with shortening it is then you have to go to that document to look for it. So that would be my only concern unless we were to link to it exactly to that point, if it's possible.
That's valid. Like if you were copying this section to do staff training or share with, you would have to then go to the other part.
Because if I'm looking for one thing that I want to answer right away, I have to now hit another thing.
That's fair.
I get the simplicity though. I do see where you're going with that.
It's a pretty long circ manual, but you know what? What's an extra sentence or two when it's already several pages long?
Someone may have a different opinion. That's just my thought on it.
Does anyone have any concerns with the wording here? Again, this is the portion in yellow is really it's just pulled from the recently approved language. So it exactly matches or closely matches. If no one has any objections, we can entertain a motion to recommend the proposed changes to this section of the circulation manual. If anyone wants to make that motion.
I motion to make the proposed changes.
Second.
I will second that.
All right, we've got Janine and then Matthew for our second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No one. All right. I think with this, because it's building on the change already approved by the CERC technical group, I feel comfortable with just making this change to the CERC manual without needing to take it back to the CERC group. Does anyone here feel differently? We could kind of take this back again to the CERC group, but I feel because we're essentially just making this match the previous decision by the CERC technical group, I feel comfortable taking the recommendation from here and implementing the change. Anyone feel? I see some nods, so hopefully anyone opposed to that? No? Okay. All right, then I will go ahead and update the CERC manual with this new language and we'll share it out with the CERC technical group just so that they have that fresh copy in their inbox. And look, I've got a cat too. Double cats. Come on, everyone. Let's see more. And that brings us to the end of our agenda, I think. Let me just go back and make sure. All right, we made it. 3 minutes to spare. I was worried there that we were going to have to go a little bit over. So we've got some follow-up tasks to make. I'm going to put together that best practices / guidelines for patrons with blocks. We'll get that info and that page out to the CERC technical group via the listserv. I'll update the CERC manual with that change to the section you just voted on. We'll work on our updated guidelines for LX Starter and get those published on the website. And then you'll all kind of look for that announcement that we're ready to take on more libraries for the LX Starter switch when you're ready. And then we'll go ahead and send out that ILL billing report to the ILL technical group as another tool for them to use when they're managing their ILL bills. So, this was our last meeting of the fiscal year. So, I will just thank everybody for the time that you spent on this group this year. I feel like this was a really robust year. We took a lot of issues and questions to this group, and you all just did such a fabulous job of tackling every agenda item with such thought, care, and using your many years of wisdom to help guide the rest of the consortia. So just like thank you so much to all of you for the time that you spent on this committee. We really, really appreciate it. Um, Again, for those of you who submitted your name for this committee or even another committee next year, we should be finalizing those rosters within the next week. So we'll be reaching out both to everyone who submitted their name, who's slotted into a new roster, and there may be a couple staff that were not able to fit in to a group this year, but there is always the next fiscal year. So thank you again for all of your work on this committee. You guys are just truly, truly the best. We appreciate it. Anything else before we sign off? No. All right. Then we will call this meeting adjourned at 10:59. 1 minute to spare. Good work, everybody. Thank you so much for all of the thought you put into this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Take care, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.